Okay, thank you, sir. So thank you everyone for joining us for the webinar on the theme Emerging Treatment Strategies in Management of Non-Small Cell Lung Cancer. Without wasting any time, I request our chairperson, Dr. Sailesh Talati, Senior Hemato-Oncologist from Ahmedabad, to please give the context setting. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Kashish. Good evening, everybody. Uh, I think the story of lung cancer in last story of non-small cell lung cancer advanced stage has become very interesting and rewarding in last 10 years, more so in last 5 years. Uh, that's because of the advances in the diagnostics that has happened and hence the therapeutic options that have emerged along with. If I remember when I was a resident, even prescribing cisplatinum for advanced NSCLC once I was a little scolded that don't waste this drug for advanced lung cancer. It is of no use. So there were also articles suggesting therapeutic nihilism for poor performance stage 4 NSCLC, meaning thereby you avoid treating them and maybe you avoid harming them. From there on, we have reached thus far that we are talking of 5 year survival in stage 4 NSCLC, and all this is because of the advances in diagnostics and advances in the therapeutic armamentum. So today we are going to have a lecture on emerging diagnostics by Dr. Aparna Dar. Then there is a talk by Dr. Akash on ALK mutated NSCLC. And then we will have case-based panel discussion and then summary by Dr. Chirag Desai. So over to Dr. Aparna Dar for evolution of the diagnostics strategy in NSCLC.
Right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Parikh, for the invite. So I've got quite the challenge set for me. In 10 minutes, I'm going to try and cram the evolution of diagnostic strategies in lung cancer, NSCLC. Without much further ado, let's get started. Next, please. So when we think about NSCLC and you just think about oncology in general, just look at how we have evolved. Next, please. Back in the 1990s, we were trying to actually figure out as to what kind of chemotherapy cocktail of choice would, for our patients. And again, over there, we saw overall survival of medians anywhere between 7.9 to 8 months. Fast forward to today, and we have a variety of technologies which help us identifying biomarkers of choice, thus increasing the overall median survival substantially for our patients. Interestingly enough, what we've also seen is that because of this coming in of this evolution that we're seeing in oncology, we're seeing an amalgamation of different disciplines of medicine coming together. So you're seeing your oncologist, you're seeing your pathologist, you're seeing your oncogeneticist, who are all part of the patient's overall care. Next, please. And it's with this multidisciplinary approach, and obviously, is when you have exchange of information. And from this exchange of information, we're actually getting to learn and understand the disease, I think, a little bit better. So what have we learned? Next, please. I think NSCLC is possibly one of the most molecularly diverse cancers that we have. I mean, just look at it. From being just NSCLC, you went and you subclassified it based on histology. If you look at the adenocarcinoma type, which is the most common subtype that we see, look at the plethora of oncogenic targeted therapies that are available in this particular subtype. Next, please. And in doing so, what we're also, sorry, could you go back for a second? Yeah. So in doing so, what you'll also see over here, that approximately 3% of these cases, we're seeing more than one oncogenic mutation in the patient. Next, please. So like I said, it is molecularly one of the most diverse cancers. And what we know today is that when we have molecular stratification, we can actually take our patients with an abnormal mutation. We can actually work out the differences between them of the different type of mutations, and we can target it accordingly. And as the disease progresses, because it is molecularly diverse, you're increasing heterogeneity. But what you're also doing is that you are able to call out these resistance mutations. mutation. So what do I mean by that? If we look over here, let's say we have a patient, NSCLC, let's say she has an EGFR L858R mutation. You put her on geftinib. When you put her on geftinib, let's say she has a PFS of, let's say, 14 months. Then you go in, you again do a molecular you do a biopsy, you do a molecular profiling, she gets a T790M, a very common resistance mutation. Again, she has a PFS of, let's say, 12 months. You again go in, you do a you do a repeat biopsy, you do molecular profiling, and she gets a MET amplification. So this cycle continues. There are so many options available. Next, please. So looking at all of this, as oncologists, as part of the patient's treating body, there are so many different, lanes, there's so many different paths that we can actually tread on. Next, please. So what we see over here is a very quick snapshot view of the current NCCN guidelines. And what this states is that a minimum of EGFR, ALK, ROS1, BRAF, and PDL1 is recommended. But this list, as we know, goes on changing. Next, please. Over here, what you see is you actually have a plethora of options. And again, this list is changing. It is getting revised as new oncogenic driver alterations are being identified. And more importantly, you're getting more agents that are getting FDA approvals. Next, please. So now that we know what our genes of interest are, and I know what my choices are, what are my options with respect to sample? Tissue is and will always be the gold standard. No matter what anybody says, it is the gold standard. But in a utopian world, I would love to have that ideal sample size so that my patient can go in and get all, get an entire panel of testing done, have all those biomarkers tested for. But we know in our clinics all too very often, in reality, what we get is barely a sliver of that tumor. And if we are going to be using the different methodologies that are available for testing these biomarkers, we don't always have sufficient tissue. So when tissue becomes an issue, next please, we have liquid biopsies. So a liquid biopsy is a good option when tissue is not available. So what is a liquid biopsy? It is essentially from the tumor, a cell breaks, it lyses, and what it does is it releases the DNA, the tumor DNA, into the bloodstream. It is that tumor DNA that gets isolated, which is essentially a somatic DNA, and that's what gets profiled. The only caveat over here I would add is that when you are doing molecular profiling using liquid biopsy, the patient should be a minimum of a stage 3B. Next, please. So now that I've figured out what are my samples of choices, we have different methodologies. PCR, you've got IHC, you've got FISH, and these are ddPCR. These are some of our has been for the longest the standard of care. And we have evolved from there, and we have found a new technique called next generation sequencing. Now, in today's day and age, what do I think is better? Next, please. While FISH, PCR, IHC are absolutely brilliant, I'm not going to belittle the standard of care. But as we've seen in lung cancer, and as I showed you earlier, NGS is known to be a little bit, it's definitely more cost effective. It has an improved TAT. We don't have to wait for a good, 4-6 weeks that we once had to. The turnaround time has reduced to 15 days. There is tissue preservation because you need a minimum 50 nanograms to actually run the NGS and test for all those biomarkers of interest. But for me, the two key points is that in a next generation sequencing, you have the potential to discover novel actionable targets. Why is that? Because you're not just looking at certain points, or just not looking at certain exons, you're actually looking at the entire gene, which means your patient has a higher percentage, a higher chance of getting an actionable targeted mutation, and they can avoid chemotherapy. In addition to that, remember that 3% I spoke about where you get more than one oncogenic driver mutation? You can actually capture multiple oncogenic mutations that, sometimes we see in EGFR, but the patient's phenotypic features is not in concordance with the mutation we've discovered. And that's because there could be maybe an ALK mutation on the side, which may be of a small percentage, but it is causing that kind of damage. So just a food for thought where I think NGS is the standard, should become the standard of care. Next, please. So this is where we are. And one of the main reasons I felt physicians were very skeptical about switching to NGS is because there was no approvals, there was no governing body telling you what is the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think when NGS has very beautifully with the FDA gotten its approvals to become a companion diagnostics. I know you're going to see names like Foundation and Garden, and yes, these are expensive tests. But when we look at, with respect to the Indian population, you have the option of the Oncomine panels. Oncomine are FDA-approved panels that are from the Thermo Fisher company, and these are possibly one of the most common, organ-specific panels that are available in India and are economical. So a patient should not be deprived next-generation sequencing because he or she cannot afford these high-end tests. Next, please. So what you see over here in this pie chart, and this is why I'm going on stressing on why I think next generation sequencing is so important, because look at these biomarkers, look at these somatic aberrations, and this is just the adeno subtype where, yes, you have KRAS at the top, and, it is the most common one, particularly in our smoking cohort, but there's also a plethora of other somatic aberrations, and there's somatic aberrations because some of these are fusions, some are structural variants. And interestingly enough, all of these are druggable, thus making NGS a good standard of care for our patients. Next, please. I've just got 2 more slides and I'm nearly done. All right, so this is where we are in 2020. We have multiple options. These can be done as monotherapy. These can also be done in conjunction with one another, and our patients have a beautiful response. Next, please. So what do I do when these cases come to my cancer genetics clinics? What do I do when you call me and you ask me for my 2 cents? Next, please. So in the case of when we have a newly diagnosed patient, especially when it's treatment naive, what I do recommend is I do prefer a tissue biopsy upfront. If tissue biopsy is not possible, then yes, we can opt for a liquid biopsy. Minimum upfront, I recommend doing an EGFR ALK, ROS1 BRAF, and a MET mutation, because as we know, MET is known to, is an inhibitor that we do tend to see with EGFR. So it is nice if we can catch them at an early stage. And in conjunction with that, I do recommend doing a PD-L1. Next, please. Now, when the disease has progressed or it's a recurrent case, what do we do then? So obviously, you've got tissue biopsy, which you take from the new metastatic site, or you can even go in for a liquid biopsy. And I think this is a brilliant time to bring in liquid biopsy because you can actually combat the tumor heterogeneity issue, which we tend to see in recurrent and progressive NSCLC cases. In an ideal scenario, it would be nice to do a tissue biopsy with a liquid biopsy. And one, and you also want to ensure that when you're doing these gene panels at this particular point, I would not be targeting just those 5 genes. I would like to broaden my gene panel and go in for a little bit, I don't want to say comprehensive genomic profiling, but I would like to look at those 20 or genes that I had listed earlier. I would like to look for resistance mutations in the form of RB1, TP53, SMAD4, because that will help tell me how my tumor is developing, how my tumor is progressing. And yes, Foundation and Garden are 2 excellent platforms for doing this, but simultaneously, patients who can't afford, you have your Oncomine panels, which support both liquid and tumor samples. Next, please. So my key take-home messages are that I think NGS time and again, we've had a lot of studies, be it the Nile study that had happened a year ago, where we saw concordance between liquid and tissue, which makes both the sample type of choice a good option. But in addition to that, we've seen time and again that the whole concept of NGS, when you do a head-on-head comparison with a standard of care, it is brilliant. There is a good concordance upfront. Newly diagnosed case, or even if it's a recurrent, without a doubt, molecular profiling by NGS, I think, is our go-to choice, because if you're increasing the breadth of analysis for each patient and giving them the opportunity to be treated with a TKI. Next, please. And with that, thank you for your patient and kind listening.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the wonderful talk. We'll move on to the next part of the session. This session is sponsored by Novartis, and our esteemed speaker is Dr. Akash Shah, medical oncologist from Gandhinagar. Over to you, sir.
Okay. So is it slides are visible?
Yes, sir. The slides are visible.
Thank you. Okay. So today for next 15 minutes, I would say something about the ALK rearrangement in metastatic non-small cell lung cancer and how should we sequence because we have now all five available TKIs for second and third generation. So in Indian context, how should we sequence it? So, as we know, for non-small cell, especially adeno, and where it's non-smokers and women, we with IHC we see 5 to 10 percentage of the ALK rearrangement positive patients, and that especially in last 5 years we have seen large number of patients, and since last 10 to 12 years we have seen development in ALK rearrangement and targeted therapy in ALK rearrangement, as it was started since 2011 when crizotinib was first approved as a first line by the phase 2 trial, and later on by Profile 1014 trial it was proved that it is better than first line palliative chemotherapy. And later on second generation ceritinib, alectinib, and in 2017 digatinib was approved with intolerant to crizotinib or progressive disease, and later on all three are approved as the first line also. And now we have as a third generation lolatinib, and which is sensitive to all these first generation and second generation resistant anti-ALK TKIs. So we have three generations of TKIs, and now for this sequencing, very important is we have right now only five drugs. It is crizotinib, ceritinib, alectinib, brigatinib, and lolatinib. So just we need to know what is the PFS, what are the side effects, and very important is as it needs to be given for longer time, what is the cost to how to sequence it. So as a first line in the first generation TKI, when crizotinib was used in ALK rearrangement positive non-small cell lung cancers, we see the large number of patients. The response rate was very high, and as green is the partial response. So large number of patients actually had the partial response, and very few patients progressed initially, which is shown in blue lines. And this was the Profile 1014 trial. Initially, it was Profile 1007 trial was done. It was as a second line crizotinib compared with the chemotherapy, and it had shown PFS benefit, followed by this Profile 1014 trial, where crizotinib was used as upfront compared to standard first line palliative pemetrexed with platinum chemotherapy, and it had shown significant primary endpoint PFS benefit from 7 to 10.9 months, and overall response rate was also improved. And with addition of some side effects, but most of the side effects were grade 1 and 2, and the common TKI side effects like fatigue, diarrhea, edema were there, and only one thing is vision disorder was the typical side effect for this crizotinib. But we have used in few patient crizotinib, and more or less it's a tolerable drug. So the tolerance is not the much issue with the crizotinib, but major issue is the PFS, which is less than 1 year, and which actually we can get through by the second generation TKI, which are ceritinib, alectinib, and brigatinib, and all three have shown which are better than the first generation TKI. So the Ascend 4 is the phase 3 trial for the ceritinib as the first line, and it was also similarly like crizotinib. It was compared with the first line chemotherapy, and the primary endpoint was PFS, but it showed very good means PFS jump from less than 1 year to 16 to 17 months for all the patients. And when they subdivided into no brain metastasis and brain metastasis, with brain metastasis without brain metastasis, it was almost 26 months. With crizotinib, it was around 13 to 14 months, so almost double. And with brain metastasis, it is 11 to 12 months. And important feature with we see with non-small cell lung cancer is the 70% of patients with it present without brain metastasis. So for these patients, seritinib, we can achieve the PFS of the 26 months, and remaining the 30 patients where brain metastasis are there. So it has shown good intracranial response compared to chemotherapy, where it was 27.3 response rate to it is more than 70% response rate, intracranial response rate was there. When Asian patients were compared in SN4 trial, so PFS was a little higher, and it is almost for all the population. It is more than 25 months it was seen compared to chemotherapy, where it was PFS was 10 months. This is a very good trial, where because 750 milligram dose was as the by phase 1, it was the MTD maximum tolerable dose, and we saw some side effects also with the seritinib. And now it is compared with the less dose with the low fat diet. It's the 450 milligram, it's 3 tablets, and 600 milligram 4 tablets were used, and the primary endpoint was the pharmacokinetic profile. And almost all three doses had the similar pharmacokinetic profile, and overall response rate was little less for 600 milligram, but 750 and 450, it's almost similar. And disease control rate were also similar, and it was non-inferior trial, but numerically 450 milligram was little better than 750 milligram at fasting condition. And similarly in PFS also, it's better with 450 milligram, and duration of response was also better. And obviously, as dose reduce, so side effect profile also, we can see this GI side effects from 80% it reduced to less than 60% with 450 milligram. And as we all use seritinib 450 milligram only now with the low fat diet, as with less side effects, it is with numerically better outcome. Second generation anti-ALK TK is the alectinib, and now it is compared with the crizotinib. It was the Alex trial, and as primary endpoint was the PFS, and here there was a large jump from this 10 to 11 months to more than 30 months. It's a 34 months PFS was achieved, and in that also they divide to with brain mets and without brain mets. So with brain mets also, it was almost 25 to 26 months PFS was there, while in crizotinib it was 7 to 8 months. And we see large number of patients, almost 70 to 80% of patients, as they survive with all this TKI for longer time. Large number of patients develops brain metastasis, and in this Alex trial, at the 12 months, less than 10% of patients with alectinib developed brain metastasis, while with crizotinib, more than 40% of patients developed brain metastasis, and it was statistically significant. Now, third drug is the brigatinib, and for first line, it was Alta one as first line trial was done with brigatinib compared to the crizotinib in all the treatment naive ALK positive metastatic non-small cell lung cancer. And here also primary endpoint was the PFS, and it with crizotinib it was around 10 months, and with brigatinib it was not brigatinib it was not reached, but at the first year end of the first year it was more than 60 percentage, while with the crizotinib it was around 40 percentage. In most of the metastatic settings, as I do also believe for the first PFS. So first PFS is very important, and here we have to divide patient from the day one if without brain mets or with brain mets. And without brain met, as first generation we achieved with the crizotinib it's 10 to 11 months of the PFS. With second generation for ceritinib we have achieved it's 26, and with alectinib it's 34 months. And if there are brain mets with crizotinib it's 7 months, ceritinib it's less than 12 months, and alectinib it is 27 months. First PFS is there. And if we compare the side effects, all the side effect profiles are comparable except in crizotinib. One specific visual disorder side effects are there, and ceritinib when we use 450 milligrams, so now side effects especially GI and liver side effects are reduced compared to 750 milligram, and obviously financial toxicity also reduced. Now, third generation is lorlatinib, and in this Solomon trial, they've subdivided into so many like few patients were treatment naive, few patients post crizotinib, few patients post ceritinib or post 2 lines of the TKI, and as the first line, very less number of 30 patients where response rate was 90 percentage, but a large number of patients were post at least 1 line of the anti-ALK TKI, and response rate was from in between 30 to 70 percentage. And second important thing was it is responding to large number of resistant mutations which are there with the second generation TKI also. Especially the very common is G1202R mutation also. This lorlatinib is sensitive. This green part is sensitive. So because of that, it has shown PFS benefit as third line TKI also. And here is the 12 of ALK, 12 ALK positive patients are studied, and which are used at least 2 or more lines of the anti-ALK TKI, and after that also the at least 70 to 80% patient had shown response rate. So here, how much is the response rate after a drug like post alectinib? This lorlatinib, this response rate is 30%. Ceritinib, it is 46%. And after crizotinib, we have second generation, and as a third line also there is 39% overall response rate is there with lorlatinib. This is as first line TKI as a first generation or second generation. We can see the median PFS it's improved from the 10 months to 16 months to now it's above 30 months, and it can be divided into with brain metastasis or without brain metastasis. Uh, and overall response rate for most of the drugs is above 70%. So NCCN recommendation is also changed. If we see with the last year, it was all were category 1 and only alectinib was preferred. But now they have somewhat divided, like alectinib continued as preferred, but other recommended is brigatinib and ceritinib, and crizotinib it's still capped as category 1, but it's useful in certain circumferences. I don't know what certain circumferences they want to keep, but due to less PFS, they have kept as a last option. To sequence the anti-ALK treatment, now we should know the PFS, and by PFS, as last blue with the alectinib, it's the maximum PFS that 34 months without brain metastasis, and we can followed up by the lorlatinib and now chemotherapy. So in Alex trial in ASCO 2020, it has shown OS benefit compared to crizotinib, and at the 5 years with crizotinib, overall survival is 45%, and with crizotinib it is the 62%. So later on it may come that with the alectinib patient might be surviving for 6 to 8 years. Problem is the cost, and almost 4.5 lakhs per month, and with the patient support program also it's 2.5 to 3 lakhs per month, and to continue it for the 3 years, so it mostly it will be difficult for almost more than 95% of our Indian population. So in Indian context, I think Ceritinib will be the better option, because now with less dose, it's a 450 milligram, monthly cost will be 35 to 40,000, and with the good PFS of more than 25 months, if there is no brain metastasis, and we have second line option of the lorlatinib, that with a PFS of 5 to 6 months, and then third line, if patients good PS, we can use chemotherapy, and patient may survive for almost 5 to 6 years. If crizotinib is used as the upfront, then second line it should be second generation, because we don't so we can have third line option of the third generation lorlatinib. So with second generation post crizotinib, we can have 5 to 6 months with second generation, and more 5 to 6 months with the third generation, and then if PS allows, we can use chemotherapy, and then with that also patient can survive for 3 to 4 years. So these takeaways with major problem with alectinib, as everybody like to use alectinib as the first line, but cost is the major problem, and so Ceritinib can be used as the first line when alectinib cannot be used, and followed by the lorlatinib, and then chemotherapy. So that's all.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful session. We'll move on to our next part of the webinar, which is the case-based panel discussion on lung cancer. Our moderator is Dr. Kaushal Patel, medical oncologist from Surat. His panelists are Dr. Amit Jatani, hemato-oncologist from Rajkot, Dr. Pinaki Mahato, medical oncologist from Vadodara, Dr. Priyanka Srivastav, medical oncologist from Anand, Dr. Ashish Agarwal, medical oncologist from Bhavnagar. Over to you, Kaushal, sir.
Yeah, good evening to all of you. Am I audible?
Very much.
Yes.
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
And my slides visible?
Yes, sir, your
Visible.
slides are visible as well.
Fine. So we will go with the case presentations and a little bit discussion, because Akash has covered everything regarding the ALK positive non-small cell metastatic lung cancers. But what is our Indian scenario, and how our clinical practice is different from the data? Because we are living in the India, and where the finance is sorry, a little bit constant to us, including the investigation also. Sometimes patients are not affording for the full gene panel of the lung cancer. So in our Indian panel, how our panelists or how our experts will treat the patients, we will discuss little bit on that aspect. So I will go with the case presentation. I have a young female with median age of around 50 to 60 years of and she is having a metastatic CA lung. She does not have any brain mets. Tissue was taken and it was diagnosed as an adenocarcinoma. Now, my first question is, what are the other investigation we would like to do in these patients to state the disease? I would like to start with Amit.
Uh, I think CT scan, brain, thorax, abdomen is done. So bone imaging is pending. So we can recommend bone scan. That is staging part.
Right. Any other Parthiva, any other comment?
Or otherwise, if facility is available, we can go for the PET CT scan. So we will completely stage the disease, and we can send the tissue for the further testing of the molecular test for the NGS panel.
Absolutely. Ashish, any other investigation would you like to do in these patients apart from the PET CT scan and tissue biopsy?
Ashish sir, you'll have to unmute your mic.
Hello,
Yeah,
am I
Ashish.
audible?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I think CT chest abdomen is enough because already she just stage 4 disease. So we don't need PET scan or bone scan. I think CT scan chest abdomen is enough with MRI brain.
Any comment on MRI brain in this patient, or anybody from the panel would like to go for MRI brain?
Yeah, MRI brain is indicated in ALK positive. Yes.
Yeah, but we just diagnosed the patient has a metastatic adenocarcinoma of CA lung. We do not have right now the ALK positive reports. So in upfront non-small cell lung cancers, are you going for MRI brain in every patient, or you have some criteria to do the MRI investigation?
If patient is asymptomatic and already contrast enhanced CT of brain is done, then we usually do not recommend for MRI brain.
Okay, fine. So ideally, the NCCN also recommend the MRI brain is an optional investigation, and if we go according to the ASMO, then MRI brain investigation is a part of investigation panel in upfront metastatic non-small cell lung cancer. Fine. So Priyanka, would you like to send this sample for any further investigation? I would like to comment on. I would like to your comment for biopsy reports. Any further investigation would you like to do?
So, adenocarcinoma. So, if basic pathology is proven with adenocarcinoma, we will proceed with the further molecular testing. Sometime we do get report from small biopsy of squamous, then we might require for further clarification whether it is pure squamous or there is a mix of squamous with adeno where we can still offer. Then also for PDL1 level also we will go for that along with the primary.
Pinakin, your comment on this one?
I think Dr. Priyanka has made an excellent point. One thing I would like to say is that in today's day and age, most of our patients are either non-smokers or ex-smokers. So even if you get a squamous cell carcinoma lung, you should be careful before labeling it as a squamous because it might be a small adenosquamous carcinoma, and because we know that lung biopsies are small biopsies, so it is possible that you are missing the adenocarcinoma component in the biopsy. So that is why it becomes important even in a squamous cell carcinoma lung to go for the additional molecular testing.
Yeah, agree. Which molecule you would like to go to test in these patients? Which genetic analysis or which genes would you like to do?
So basically, in the olden days, we used to do sequentially first EGFR, then ALK, then others like ROS1, BRAF, and MET. Now, more and more, I have started doing NGS because in a single investigation, you can get the reports, and the turnover time also has reduced from before.
How much turnover time from your laboratory?
So generally, it takes around 3 weeks.
3 weeks means it's 20 days, we can say.
Yeah. So like I'm doing Oncomine, so Oncomine gets the reports in around 3 weeks.
Fine, good enough.
I would like to add a practical point here. So I'm working in a rural setup, I would say, because it's a small town, and most of my patients are government scheme beneficiaries. So in those patients, we do have gefitinib and erlotinib we can still offer. So in those patients, we go stepwise. If patient is affording, then we can go ahead directly with the NGS. Otherwise, I would just restrict myself to the EGFR as of now for practical purposes in the setup I'm working on.
Absolutely. So the conclusion is that if the patient is affording, then we can go directly for NGS, which include all lung panel genes, which include EGFR, ROS, MET1, BRAF, PDL1 also. And if the patient is not affordable, then we can go sequential, right?
Yeah, Dr.
Yes.
Kaushal, other thing is that the magnification that you get in NGS is 100 times better than what you get in this routine. So that magnification is also more, so you will get a more comprehensive sequencing of the exam. That is one
Yeah.
thing also that we should tell the patient. What is the difference between the routine doing the report and versus NGS?
Yeah, fair enough. We have discussed that according to the Pinaki, the turnaround time for the reports is around 15 to 20 days. So would you like to wait for the reports to start any treatments, or anybody would like to go for the start the treatments without NGS, the basic treatments, I think chemotherapy or something like? Any comment from Amit?
Uh, our patient is female, non-smoker, and age of around 50 to 80. And if without much of the tumor burden, then I do start with EGFR TKI and do wait for the reports.
Okay. Any
Uh,
difference of opinion?
I wait for the NGS report. If patient is low tumor burden, and then according to report, I will start the treatment.
Fine. Parthiv, any difference of opinion
No,
in
it
this?
is it is of a stage 4 disease. It is better to start with EGFR TKI till the report comes,
Fine. Uh,
and
so
we can change the TKI according to the report
according to
of
the
NGS
report,
pathology.
yeah. Priyanka, you were talking something.
I would like to start with the first cycle of chemotherapy and wait for the final report.
Okay, so my
So
panel is
I also agree with Dr. Priyanka. I think we should start if the patient is not, unless the patient is very elderly or has a lot of comorbidities which precludes the use of chemo, we generally start chemotherapy because it anyway is going to work in whatever mutations the patient might have. So generally we get some added time before the reports are coming.
Yeah, so my panel is divided. Half of the panelist experts in favor of starting treatments without waiting for the NGS or molecular testing reports, and half of the panel will wait for the reports.
The other thing is it is a matter of uncertainty. If you tell the patient that you have to wait for 20 days for the reports, the patient will definitely think that there are some problems. So definitely we start something.
Uh,
I
if
think
we,
the patient is
if we
asymptomatic,
count,
then we should wait for the report and then they start the treatment.
And sometimes when we give gefitinib or something and the mutations either come negative or some other, then it's difficult to justify to the patient.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
once what happened with me is that one patient I started gefitinib and she responded well, and then she had a ROS1 mutation. She didn't have an EGFR mutation. So I was really confused now what to do. So, but again, I think it is better to either give chemo or to wait.
Yeah. So my practical answer is that in this scenario, if the patient is very much symptomatic, then we can start ahead with the first cycles of the chemotherapy. And if the patient is reasonably asymptomatic or low symptomatic with low tumor burden, then we can wait for the report to come and then we can start the treatments depend upon the reports. Because as Pinaki mentioned, sometimes we'll end up in complication if the patient is turned out to be other mutation and we have started the medications for the some other mutations. Because even though the EGFR mutation is quite common in our Indian populations, particularly as Amit has mentioned that the female, non-smoker, Asian, but sometimes it's negative. I have experienced even yesterday also. I started the patient in EGFR in view of that the patient would turn off with the EGFR positive in typical scenario, female non-smoker, but she turned out to be ALK positive. So sometimes it happens, and we are in such a different situation to give the answer to the patients when patient is educated and quite reasonable. All this thing has been covered in previous lecture. So my questions once again to all panelists. Are you sending the sample for all genetic mutations simultaneously, or are you planning for sequential testing, starting from the Amit?
I do send for all mutation at a time.
At a time. Priyanka has already answered the questions. Now, what about Pinaki?
Yeah, I do send. And now, you have got certain companies like this BMS and all, they are giving the free panels also for by NGS also. So we generally send EGFR, ALK, ROS, BRAF, MET. That is how I send. If the patient, otherwise, if it is not possible, then sequentially EGFR and ALK.
But mostly you are sending simultaneously all the panel together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it depends. If you see that the patient, if the patient has got a MET mutation or a BRAF mutation, the patient is not going to afford the therapy. Then in that case, probably you are going for EGFR ALK because you know that otherwise the patient is anyway not going to afford the mutation-related target therapy.
Absolutely. What about Ashish?
Yeah, I fully agree with Dr. Pinaki. It depends on the patient's profile. If patient is affordable, I go with NGS panel. If patient is not affordable, then sequential EGFR ROS1.
Okay, fine. But to a certain extent, we can have some prognostic idea from all the mutation if we do.
I
Even
know.
though the patient is not affordable for thing, because the cost of the all investigation is, I think, 20 to 25,000 or less, even less in some scenario also. Parthiv bhai, what about your opinion in this?
Yes, I agree with Pinaki.
Okay. So mostly all people will like to send the sample simultaneously for all panels. And in certain circumstances, when the patient is not affordable or some other issues, in that particular cases, we will do the sequential analysis. So this is two aspects as discussed, sequential versus a whole panel. Now the patient is turned out to be rearrangement positive. Now, in this particular scenario, what is the first line treatments of your choice? This is most important question, starting from the Amit.
If the affordability is not an issue, then definitely alectinib first.
Right.
And if the affordability is an issue, then ceritinib first.
Right. Priyanka?
Yes, same. If the affordability is not an issue, alectinib is the best responses.
Okay, forget about the affordability in our discussions. Patient is fully affordable.
So first choice would be alectinib only.
Okay. Any difference of opinion from my panels? Anybody would like to choose apart from alectinib?
I agree with alectinib.
Okay. Even though the patient does not have any brain mets, all would like to go with alectinib, like osimertinib in EGFR mutated patients, right?
Yeah.
Right. Nobody would like to in favor of crizotinib. Okay, though ceritinib or crizotinib. Right. And if the patient does have brain mets, then any because all have choose this alectinib as a first line treatments option. So if the patient does have any brain mets, then any difference?
Then also alectinib first, because alectinib is having better CNS penetration compared to
absolutely
the rivals.
Fine. So these are some of the common symptoms or common clinical parameters of the ALK positive malignancy. In clinical scenario, most of the patients have a history of non-smoking, and most of the patient have tendency to go to the brains. 70% of the patients at diagnosis does not have any brain metastasis, while 30% of the patient does have brain metastasis at the diagnosis. So if we see the data, then we can say the patient does have brain mets do poor, as we all know in clinical practice. But still, with the drugs which penetrate the brain, like ceritinib or alectinib, the patient who does have brain metastasis also do well with available drugs, ceritinib or alectinib, compared to the support care. So these are some of the trials which already discussed by the Akash, the Profile 14 and SN4, which compare crizotinib versus chemotherapy and ceritinib versus chemotherapy, and Alex trial which compared alectinib versus crizotinib. So in all these three, if we see, then alectinib does very well compared to the ceritinib and crizotinib. So all are in favor to choose alectinib as a first line treatments in ALK positive metastatic non-small cell lung cancer, even though the patient does have brain mets or no brain mets. So these are the difference of the slides, which has been already covered by the Akash. Now in recently we have data which compared crizotinib versus lorlatinib as a first line treatment options. Any comment from my panel on this study, or any opinion to choose lorlatinib as a first line treatments because it does well compared to the crizotinib as a first line treatment? Starting from Amit.
Yeah, because the best player should be in the first line only, like osimertinib in EGFR mutation positive. So later, I feel lorlatinib will also come as a first line in ALK mutation positive.
Right. Pinaki,
LSAs.
any comment?
No, exactly as Dr. Amit is saying. I think there will be a comparison between alectinib and lorlatinib. But till then, if lorlatinib is available, definitely I would choose it over crizotinib.
Right, absolutely. Because we require the study which compare best to best. Because alectinib is best compared to the crizotinib, so we required some of the data which compared the alectinib versus lorlatinib to get lorlatinib as a first-line therapy options. Now, if the patient has started with ceritinib, she has taken ceritinib for around, we can say, 14 months of time periods, and she progressed in form of the brain mets, new development of the brain mets. Now, what is the plan of treatments in this particular scenario? Starting from Priyanka.
So the burden of disease I'll assess if the MRI brain will tell us how many mets, and if they can be treated, I'll get my radiation oncologist opinion.
Yeah. We have taken local treatments in form of the whole brain radiation therapy or SRS, depend upon the location as well as number of the tumors. Now, what about the systemic aspect of the treatments? Would you like to treat these patients with any other, because you have chosen alectinib as a first line treatments. Now, a patient has progressed over the alectinib.
So there is an option of continuing the alectinib in this patient.
And if the patient is severe symptomatic,
if the disease, then we can change again. If the finances is not an issue, then we can change to the second line again. But if a patient is okay and the lesions in the brain have been taken care by the radiation, then we can continue giving for some more time.
Fine. Pinaki, patient has taken ceritinib and she progressed after 14 months. Now, what is the treatment of your choice?
So either alectinib or lorlatinib, I think that will be the next kind of option.
Okay, fine. Is there any data to support alectinib as a second line therapy?
I think there is some trial. I don't know the sequence of first ceritinib and then alectinib.
Patient is progress on alectinib, then we have to change to lorlatinib after local treatment.
Yeah, alectinib after alectinib we have only one option, that is a lorlatinib. But after ceritinib, any other panelists would like to go for alectinib after ceritinib to alectinib?
No, mostly lorlatinib.
Yeah, because I think there is no much data which support alectinib as a second line after progression of this ceritinib or crizotinib. Anybody would like to go in favor of the chemotherapy instead of the lorlatinib?
If patient is not affordable, then can consider chemotherapy.
Yeah, because lorlatinib is also one of the costly.
Yeah.
And once the patient has taken alectinib for
there is not much.
So Akash has also discussed regarding the safety profile. I would like to know from my panel, from their clinical expert or clinical experience, are they facing any trouble, or are they facing to reduce the dosage in patient who is taking crizotinib or ceritinib? Because with our clinical experience with alectinib is not much. So I would like to go with panel and know what is your experience regarding the side effects, or we can say the quality of life of the patient who is taking crizotinib and ceritinib. Starting from Priyanka.
Right now, I have 2 patients on ceritinib, and their quality of life is excellent. They are working out more than me. So I would say that they've done well. Someone had pleural lesion, which is now completely died. Overall, their liver function and counts have been very well controlled, and their quality of life has been good with ceritinib. Crizotinib is not a preferred option for me right now.
So I have two. I have one patient on crizo and 2 patients on ceri, and all 3 are doing well. I didn't have any issues. I've done repeated the LFTs and all, and no visual complaints, no problems, GI complaints. All 3 of them are having an active life. So no complaints from my side.
Ashish, any comment from your side?
I don't have any much issue with ceritinib and crizotinib. They are well tolerated.
Fine. Parthiv bhai, any?
Generally, tolerance is good, but sometimes LFT altered. At that time, we have to reduce whether the SGT, SGPT goes beyond 5 times, then we have to reduce dose to 1/3.
Right. Amit.
In one of we have two patients on Seritinib. In one of our patient had severe nausea and vomiting, and I need to give 3 line of antiemetics. And after 10 days, gradually his tolerance to Seritinib has improved, and later we have reduced the antiemetic dose. Another patient is doing well with Seritinib.
Fine. So fair enough. We can say from our clinical experience, the ALK inhibitors are a little bit easy to tolerate by the patients. So these are the some of the sequencing as well as first line treatments. So the best treatment should be given first if the patient is affordable, that is alectinib. And if the patient is progress over the alectinib, then we have options of the treatment in form of the lorlatinib right now. If the patient is not affordable, then we have choice of the crizotinib versus ceritinib, and I would like to use ceritinib as a first line compared to the crizotinib because I have experience with visual disturbance in two of my patients and significant pedal edema in all patients who are taking crizotinib, and that is impairing the quality of life also. So this is a take-home message from panel discussion. Thank you very much.
I think Kaushal, we do have, I think, generic Seritinib. So I think that also makes a difference because if you have a generic version, if the patient is not affording, you can use Seritinib generic.
Absolutely. Even in that particular cases, we can give full dose also.
Yeah.
Fine. Good.
Which is not necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you to all the panelists. I now request our second chairperson, Dr. Chirag Desai, Senior Medical Oncologist from Ahmedabad, to please give the conclusion and the wrap up. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Kashish. I don't have any slide to present, so I will be giving some concluding remarks. And I have been given 3 minutes, 3 great minutes to do the same. So Aparna had a very nice presentation about choosing the appropriate molecular to help the treatment of our patients. So I will go one step backwards, and I will say that before about 10 years, we were conducting a lot of seminars and CME programs to encourage the pulmonologists, the radiologists, as well as the oncologists to ensure that molecular tests are performed. And from that, we have evolved, and now we have to choose from which test to be performed. So for adenocarcinoma, all of us are very upfront, and we all perform the molecular testing in some way or other to find out the molecular target to help treatment of our patients. We are not enthusiastic about squamous cell carcinoma, but I would say that in coming years, I think we should start looking at the mutations like, of course, EGFR, not so very frequently with ALK or ROS1, but we should look at the mutations like MET or NTRK. Of course, we should look at PDL1 for squamous cell carcinoma as well. And for the large cell carcinoma and some of the other rare type of carcinoma, we are not sure. But if we do the broad molecular profiling, we pick up a lot of mutations that will help in treatment of our patients. Now, I heard at the discussion about what test to be performed. But I would say that the test which has the minimal turnaround time should be performed first, because our patient should not wait for very long. So in the ideal world, and I don't know whether the ideal world exists or not, what I would do is that I will send EGFR, ALK, ROS1, BRAF, MET, and PDL1 by ISC, FISH, or PCR based method that will give me the result within 5 to 6 days. Right? And if any of them is positive, except for PDL1, I will start with the treatment. At the same time, I will ask the laboratory in the ideal world, I mean, finance is not constrained, to go for NGS based test, either Foundation One or maybe Oncomine or whatever, NGS based test for broad molecular profiling, which will give me, which will pick up few more patients having one of the mutation. But the problem here with NGS based test is that it will take about 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the panel and depending on the lab that we are using. With Oncomine, it's a little earlier with Oncomine panel, but if the tissue has to go abroad, it's little longer. right? So Aparna, I saw your remark that NGS test takes about 15 days. So yeah, with Oncomine test, it's shorter as compared to the other test. I also use Oncomine in many of my patients. And at the same time, I will send the liquid biopsy as well. I will ask the laboratory to prepare the DNA from the liquid biopsy. Again, in the ideal world, if one of these is coming negative, then we can have the vector from the liquid biopsy, which can pick up few more patients to look at the mutations. So simultaneously, everything at one go. And if something comes positive, ask the laboratory to stop at that point in time, because co-mutation of multiple genes is a rarity. We don't look so actively for multiple mutations. So that's something that I wanted to tell you about selection of the test that we will do for mutation analysis. For ALK, I think we have now multiple drugs, and all of them are good drugs. I won't be very upfront in selecting one over other. If the subsequent drug is available for the treatment, we have first-line data of crizotinib versus chemotherapy, ceritinib versus chemotherapy, elatinib versus crizotinib, brigatinib versus crizotinib, and lorlatinib versus crizotinib, right? And in each of this study, the second drug which I mentioned did poorly as compared to the first drug which I mentioned. We have second-line data of ceritinib, elatinib, briga, as well as lorlatinib. But if one of the second generation TKI was used, like elatinib or brigatinib, we have the data of lorlatinib as the subsequent line, but we don't have data of second-line drug if lorlatinib was used as the first line. So does it mean that we should use the inferior drug as first line? No, I mean, I don't have any intention to say that. But if the brain metastasis is not there, I think I will still want to start with crizotinib and go ahead with the other drug as a subsequent line. I want to remind you the trial that was published in Journal of Clinical Oncology in July 2018, that if only one line of ALK targeted therapy was used versus multiple drugs were used to target the ALK mutation, and when multiple drugs were used, the median survival was for 59.6 months. So that was excellent. So can we imagine that the patient with metastatic NSCLC, half of them surviving beyond 5 years in spite of having metastasis? So I don't want to push a drug versus another drug as first or second line. What I want to tell you in this panel discussion as well as in this program is that we should use more than one drug, one after other, to target ALK mutation, and that will give you excellent result. So I think with that comment, I would like to stop here, and thank you very much for involving me in this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chirag sir. And we've come to the end of the webinar. So I'd like to thank our program director, Dr. Paresh Parekh, Sailesh sir, Chirag sir, Akash sir, Kaushal sir, and Aparna ma'am, and also all the panelists for the wonderful session. I would also like to thank our supporters, Novartis, Core Diagnostics, Indian Cooperative Oncology Network, and Integrated Academic Society of Clinical Oncology. Thank you to all the participants. And with that, I will close the session.